panelists today are Megan Vaith from Northbourne Crop Insurance. Megan is the founder of Northbourne Organic Crop Insurance. She uses her expertise to advise organic farmers how to utilize their insurance options to mitigate risk and set their farm up for financial success. Finding expertise in organic crop insurance is rare in our industry, and she's trying to change this. She created her services to specifically address organic crop insurance needs, and today she's going to highlight some of those main considerations for organic grain farmers. We also have Kate Hansen from Center for Rural Affairs. Kate is a policy associate with the Center for Rural Affairs, which was founded in 1973, and has been since a leading force engaging folks to build a better rural future. Her work focuses on policy solutions in the realms of conservation, risk management, water quality, and rural development. And she's based in central Iowa, originally from Indiana. And then we have Anna Jones-Crabtree, the owner of Vilcus Farms, along with her husband, Doug, which is located in north central Montana. Anna is also an Indiana native, and Anna moved to Montana to begin farming, where she encountered a huge gap in resources for grain farmers trying to get on the land. From these experiences, she started the Vilcus Training Institute, which is the first organic grain farmer apprenticeship in North America, I think. Since 2009, Vilcus has seen full cycles of crop rotations and grown from approximately 1,200 acres to 9,000 acres. She's also serving on the Midwest Grainshed Farmer Advisory Council. Okay, so I'm gonna allow our panelists to introduce themselves as well, and we'll start with Megan. Take it away.
Yes, and I'm not sure if everybody else is seeing this as well, but the crop insurance poll is like smack dab in the middle of the screen on mine, covering everything.
Did I get rid of it? It should be gone now. Stop sharing.
Maybe if I just X out of it. Is everyone else seeing it, or does it look fine on everybody else's?
I X'd out of it and now it's gone.
Okay, well, X out of it if you still see it then. It looks like about 50% of farmers here use crop insurance based on the results, if you didn't see that. So first of all, thank you for having me. Very excited to be here. And this seems like a kind of a fun, interactive, small group too. So hopefully we get a lot of good conversations going. So I don't mind if you stop me and ask questions. That's actually probably preferred rather than just talking to a computer. So I would appreciate that. So like Christine said, my name is Megan Vaith, and I'm the owner of Northbourne Organic Crop Insurance. And kind of how that came about was a few years back, I kind of took a look at the organic or just the crop insurance industry in general and realized that organic farmers were pretty underserved. It seemed like every agent had one or two organic policies on their books, and they didn't really understand the ins and outs of it and the extra reporting requirements that come with it. So I kind of took that as an opportunity to branch off on my own and start a business going that route. And shortly within that came organic, or not just organic crop insurance, but just crop insurance for specialty farmers as well, because there's really not an expert in that. So it kind of crossed over into both of those aspects. So that's kind of a little bit of a background on myself. If you want to go to the next slide, Christine. Okay, perfect. So before we kind of dig into specific options for food grade farmers that you guys may have, I kind of wanted to do an overview of what is crop insurance in general, which is probably good since there's some people on here that have not purchased it in the past. So crop insurance is protection on the crops that you plant in your fields against any natural peril, which basically means that you are covered against any sort of weather-related event, whether it be drought, excess moisture, wind, hail, even like insect infestation or wildlife is covered as well. And then depending on the crop, if there's revenue protection available, you are also protected against a decline in the price as the year goes on. Most crops have coverage levels available from 50% to 85% in 5% increments. So this allows farmers to have several options for price points that they can choose coverage with. Crop insurance is a federally subsidized program. And so you can see this chart on the bottom shows the subsidy rate for coverage levels per unit option. And so most producers, I would say, are within that optional unit and enterprise unit category, which is the two middle lines in there. So you can see as you go across where the subsidy levels are sitting. So for example, 75% coverage, which is that top line there. If you keep going down, it shows that optional units, you have a 55% subsidy, which means that the government is paying 55% of your crop insurance bill, which makes it quite a bit more affordable for farmers. Crop insurance policies are available by crop and by county. So this offers producers a little bit of flexibility by choosing different coverage levels per crop, or maybe only insuring some crops and not others, or some counties and not others, depending on what the needs are for your operation. So why is it important to purchase crop insurance? Why are we talking about it today? Crop insurance is actually the only input cost on your operation that can guarantee you some sort of revenue. So you can plant all the seeds you want, whatever you need to do there, and there's no actual guarantee that you will get any money back at the end of the year, where crop insurance is automatically guaranteeing you some sort of revenue as long as you follow all the procedures throughout the year.
Megan, can you just describe really quickly what those units mean?
Yes, and I'll get into it in a little bit. Yeah, so just hold your breath, I guess, for 1 minute, but yeah. So here's a little bit of about how crop insurance works, what a crop insurance guarantee is. So on the left there, we have a calculation for a bushel guarantee. And so you'll see here that this farmer, this is on corn, just as an example, he has an approved yield of 200 bushel. So this means that over the last 10 years of farming, he had an average yield of 200 bushels. And that's what he can use as his approved yield. So really anywhere between 4 and 10 years, the average yield is used as an approved yield, kind of as a baseline. From there on, you have to choose your coverage level. So this producer chose 80% as his coverage level to give him a bushel guarantee of 160 bushel. So when he harvests his crop in the fall, if his yield is less than 160 bushels, he will trigger a loss. The calculation on the right shows what the revenue guarantee is. So you take that bushel guarantee of 160 bushel, multiply it by the crop insurance price, which this one here is the organic crop insurance price for 2022 of $11.72 to give us a guarantee of about $1,875. So this means if there was no crop in the fall, we're in an extreme drought, which I'm in South Dakota and we are here. I know we just got some appraisals back that we're sitting around 3 bushels. And so if that were 0 bushels, we would collect $1,875 per acre on our crop insurance policy. So this is an example of how a revenue protection policy works and how your coverage can change as the year goes on, depending on where the harvest price sits. So that price that we talked about on the last slide of $11.72 came from the spring crop insurance price, which is the daily closing price on the Board of Trade average throughout the entire month of February. So they look at the conventional corn closing price every day throughout the month of February, average it, and come out with the conventional crop insurance price. Then they take a factor times that price to determine where they think the value is in crop insurance, which is usually about 2 times of what the conventional price is. And that's how they determine the organic price. So they also track the price in the fall as well to collect or to calculate a harvest price. So the spring price is tracked in February, where the harvest price is tracked throughout the month of October. Same way where they take a daily average closing price based off of the board for conventional corn and then use a factor to make it organic. So the first example on the left here shows how your crop insurance coverage could change if there was a harvest price throughout the year, a harvest price increase, throughout the year. And so basically in this situation, you are allowed to use either the higher of the spring or the harvest price. And so this price is, since this price is higher, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little tongue tied here. you will use this higher price of $12.80. So when you go through to recalculate your guarantee, you will now have a total guaranteed revenue of over $2,000 per acre. And so if any yield loss occurs, like let's say you harvested 150 bushels and you were 10 bushels short, instead of having those 10 bushels multiplied by that spring price of $11.72, you would take that times the fall price of $12.80. Then the coverage level on the right side shows how your coverage could change if the harvest price is lower in the fall. So here you have your original guaranteed revenue that we went over on the last slide of about $1,875. And to calculate your new bushel guarantee, you take that divided by the harvest price of $10.75 in this situation to get a new bushel guarantee of $174. So this calculation seems a little bit funky, but really when you look at it, in order to get to that same revenue structure that we looked at on the previous slide, with a lower price, it now takes more bushels to be able to get to that total revenue. So now you have a higher bushel guarantee. So here are some options that are available or maybe beneficial specifically to food grade farmers. So first we're going to go over enterprise units by type. I'll kind of go over the unit structures a little bit, and then specifically enterprise units by type. Contract pricing, which can be really beneficial to organic farmers. Written agreements, and whole farm revenue protection. So like you had asked, what their unit structures mean, what is enterprise units, what is optional units? So kind of a baseline on that. Optional units are a policy where each section is tracked individually per crop. And so if you have two fields that are in different sections, both planted to the same crop, we can say wheat or whatever it may be, wheat. Those yields will be tracked separately. So if one field had a loss, you could collect on it, and the other fields could still do really well. They're tracked completely separately. Enterprise units is a different structure where the crop is basically averaged together. So if one field does poor and the other one does well, fields are averaged together to see whether you actually trigger a loss or not. And I wish I had some numbers to kind of show a better example on that, but I don't have that in this slide. Enterprise units are a little bit of a riskier option because it's harder to collect on it because everything is averaged together instead of per field, which is why the subsidy level is quite a bit higher. And one option that could be really good for specialty farmers or food grade farmers is this new enterprise unit option by type. And so kind of a breakdown of what enterprise units are is basic enterprise units, you have one guarantee for the entire crop in that county since everything's averaged together. Then about maybe 5-6 years ago, they broke it down where you can do enterprise by practice. And so this means that your irrigated land could be tracked separately than your non-irrigated land. So like specifically for this year, we're going to see a lot of losses on non-irrigated land because of the extreme drought that we're in. However, the irrigated land is still doing pretty well because it's been watered throughout the year. And so since those are kept tracked separately, you can collect a loss on your dry land, but not on your irrigated, instead of it all being averaged together. Then a new thing that came out for the 2022 crop year is enterprise by type. And unfortunately, they haven't released any more crops for it yet, but hopefully they'll make an announcement in the spring to add more to it. So this policy qualifies for wheat, dry beans, dry peas, and sunflowers, where you can have a separate guarantee per type of crop if you're farming more than one type. So like for wheat, you can do separate guarantees for your winter wheat and your spring wheat, which is a really big deal here in the Dakotas at least. And then dry peas, you can have a completely different structure for each different type of pea that you plant too. So that could be really beneficial to this group of farmers. In order to get this discount and qualify for enterprise units by type, you need to have at least acres planted in 2 different sections for one of the types to qualify for that subsidy increase. One option that's really beneficial to the organic farmer is contract pricing. And this allows you to kind of personalize your crop insurance policy where you can insure your crops at your specific contracted price. So without those contracts, you have to use the RMA established price, which we went over earlier was $11.72 on corn. So in this instance, if you have a contract for higher than that, you can substitute your contracted price and not use that 1172. I kind of went over this a little bit earlier, but this next bullet is just on how they calculate the price by using the board price and then using a factor to increase it to what the organic value will be. So here it shows that over the last 5 years, it was about 2.26 times the conventional price on average on corn and 1.94 on average on soybeans. In order to use contract pricing on your crop insurance policy, you have to have a special option on your policy by sales closing, which is March 15th. And this special option isn't saying that you absolutely have to use a contract, it's just giving you the ability to use it if you want to. So the time when you determine on whether you want to actually use that contract or not is acreage reporting deadline, which is most often July 15th for most crops. And so at that point, you have to submit the contract to your crop insurance agent in order to substitute that price. There are caps, unfortunately, on how high your contract price can go. And most of them are sitting at 1.5 times. So like you can see, it's 1.5 times on corn, but soybeans is 1.75 times the organic crop insurance price, which is nice. And I know like triticale, I think, is 2 times. So it kind of depends on the crop, and they're trying to increase all those factors as well to make it more realistic so we can have specific coverage available to us. Sorry, I'm reading the question as it's coming through. Is timing for contract pricing different for winter annuals? Most often they are still wanting it by that acreage reporting deadline, which for winter crops is typically usually around November 15th or maybe December 15th, depending on the area. And most often they still want that contract then. However, they might accept it in the spring. It just kind of depends on the crop insurance company that you're working with. So a lot of times it takes a lot of phone calls to see whether they'll accept it or not. It's always worth a shot. Here's an example on soybeans on what the contract pricing could do to your policy. So on the left, we show what coverage is like without contract pricing. So in this instance, this producer has a bushel guarantee of 48 bushels times the spring insurance price for 2022 of $27.41, giving him a $1,300 guarantee. On the right, it shows how your coverage could change if this producer used his contract price in place of that crop insurance price. So this producer was able to get a contract for $38 per bushel, which I'd say is right in the ballpark of where they're kind of sitting this year for feed grade, and then a little bit more even for food grade. And so in this instance, it actually increased his guarantee from $1,300 to $1,800. So in a year like this, when we're really not seeing much yield out there, this can make a really big difference for the farmer with how much money they collect at the end of the year. Written agreements are a really good option for producers to apply for coverage where coverage is not currently available. So basically, crop insurance options are kind of written out there in actuarial documents for what coverages are allowed per crop per county. Everything goes down to the county level. And if your crop that you're planting is not listed on there, there's an option here where you can apply for a written agreement to get coverage on that policy. A lot of times when you're applying for this coverage, you need some sort of supporting documentation, and that might mean you have to have history of planting that crop and be able to show yield history. Sometimes it's a letter from an expert in the field saying that this area is likely to grow a good crop for that. Or sometimes it's maps showing that the soil rating is good enough to qualify. The most common types of written agreements that we see are listed here. So you can see they're high risk written agreements, and this changes the rating on high risk land from high risk to regular land. And they typically allow this when they've seen multiple years where the yield seems to be in line with the regular land, because otherwise high risk land is rated really high and has to pay a really high premium. New breaking is also a really common one. So this is a request to get coverage on land that has not been planted and harvested in one of the most 3 previous crop years, which sounds kind of scary, but alfalfa is kind of a loophole around this where you do not have to apply for a new breaking written agreement on alfalfa since it's part of a normal rotation. Then XC is a county without actuarial documents. So this is where you're requesting coverage for a crop that coverage is not currently available in the county, which in this industry with specialty and organic and farmers planting different crops than maybe the norm, we see this all the time. Whole farm revenue protection is a really great option for organic and specialty farmers because it's kind of all inclusive. And so this takes a different approach to crop insurance where instead of having a yield guarantee, everything is an overall revenue guarantee over your entire operation. So your guarantee on whole farm revenue protection is based on your previous allowable revenue versus your expected revenue based on your Schedule F history. And so in order to qualify for this product, you have to have 5 consecutive years of farm tax history. And even in order to get a quote for this policy, you have to submit those 5 years of Schedule F to your agent to be able to look at what coverage might be for you. There are coverage levels available from 50% to 75% for farmers that only farm 1 or 2 commodities. However, if you farm 3 or more commodities, you can purchase up to 80 and 85%. And there's actually a little break in there where the more commodities you farm, the more of a discount you get. And so the subsidy rating is higher for more commodities. The huge benefit to this policy is that whole farm revenue protection can actually cover virtually any crop that's planted other than timber, forest, or animals for show or sport. So it's a really great option for specialty farmers where maybe crops that you're planting don't have coverage and options available in the county. Here's a way to actually get some coverage. This also works really well as an umbrella policy if you're able to purchase multi-peril crop insurance on your crop. So you can just add an extra level of revenue protection to your operation. The biggest downfalls, however, to this policy is that there's lots of paperwork involved. Like I said, there's a lot of Schedule F history that's necessary, and then you have to fill out a lot of forms as the year is going on as well. And the other major downfall to it is that claims are delayed as it follows the tax year. And so typically we're used to seeing crop insurance claims being paid out in the fall after harvest, where on this policy, claims will not be paid out until the next spring after you file your taxes. So I get the question all the time, is it really worth all the paperwork? It kind of seems like a big hassle. Is it really worth it? And I kind of think it depends on your operation. So for this kind of group of farmers, I think it probably is, because a lot of these farmers in this group are probably planting crops that you can't purchase other crop insurance on. So this is kind of your only option. So it's definitely worth it. Also, like I said earlier, it's a really great option to have an overall safety net on your entire operation, just to make sure that you're fully covered for the year to kind of keep your farm afloat, keep you farming in the future, make sure you have enough revenue coming in. So earlier I talked about they look at what is allowable revenue versus expected revenue. So what really is allowable revenue? What does that mean? So basically they look at the revenue section on your Schedule F and qualify anything that pertains specifically to the crop. So any agricultural program payments, maybe through the FSA office, and custom hire payments are excluded from there. And also post-production expenses and revenues are excluded. So you can't count any revenue from applesauce, jams. In the handbook, they list like bottled water if you sell water at maybe a farm stand or something like that. So there's kind of 3 different structures as to how you can report your crop under whole farm revenue protection. So I kind of wanted to briefly go through that. I feel like we could have an hour-long presentation specifically on whole farm revenue protection. So I'm kind of trying to keep it a little bit brief here. So the first one, which is kind of the main one when it first came out, is line by line commodities. And under this structure, each commodity is reported separately. So you have to know your expenses, revenue, yield for each commodity individually and have all those records handy in order to get coverage on it. So some of the benefits on this is that you can have an unlimited amount of commodities. And like I said, you get a rate discount with each commodity added up to a certain extent. But this is beneficial to kind of make sure everything is covered individually. Another option which they came out with maybe 3 years ago is combined direct marketing. And this allows you to combine all the commodities together under one line that you're selling directly to the consumer. And so this way you don't have to have as many records for revenue and expenses per crop. You can actually combine them together, but it has to be a commodity that you sell directly to the producer. It can't be something that you sell to a store or somewhere else. So this commodity this combined direct marketing automatically qualifies as 2 commodities on their reporting process. Some of the benefits to this are that you can combine all the sales records together, so you don't have to have individual records. And so it makes it a lot easier to report than the line-by-line commodities. And the last one, which is new as of last year, is micro farm. And so this allows you to include all of the agricultural commodities on your entire operation together. And your commodity count will automatically equal 3 so that you can qualify for that 80 to 85% coverage level if you desire to choose those levels. On this one, it's kind of like the combined direct marketing, but it doesn't have to be directly to the end consumer. You can automatically combine everything together in order to calculate the expected revenue and expenses throughout the year, which also means that you can have consolidated sales records. And this is kind of also the only option where you can have post-production operations and value added into this policy. So you can make sure that you have coverage on your products like your applesauce, jam, apple butter, all of that stuff, which is really nice because I know there was a need for that in the past. And so this is really great for the small producer. As of last year, they made this policy available to producers, but had a limit that you were only able to qualify for this if you had less than $100,000 of allowable revenue. And Kate and I, who's going to talk in a little bit, we're actually on a work group to try to come up with maybe better ways to implement whole farm revenue protection. And one of our main suggestions were to increase that limit. And they just announced last week that they increased it to $350,000 for this year. So that was a really big win for us, and we're really excited for it. So I think this will be a really good option for a lot more farmers and be able to include a lot more people. So we're really excited about that, and I think that's a really good thing. Oh, and one last thing that I kind of wanted to go over as part of the organic training initiative is an announcement that came out 2 to 3 weeks ago, I guess, at this point. And this is the Transitional and Organic Grower Assistance Program. And this is where they offer extra premium assistance specifically for organic farmers. So transitional organic farmers will receive an additional 10 percentage points of subsidy on their premium. So that'll cheapen up their premium a little bit. And then certified organic crops receive an additional $5 per acre premium discount. So if you've looked at organic crop insurance premiums, you've noticed that the premiums can be kind of high because the value is really high. So this is a good way to kind of reduce those premiums and reduce the stress on the organic farmers. As far as I have seen from all the documents I've read on it, is it doesn't look like when you go to quote your crop insurance that the quotes will reflect this premium discount. It will just be shown on your billing summary at the end of the year. So I just kind of wanted to make that a point. So make sure that when you're going through coverage levels and all of that with your agent, that they are aware, or you're working with someone that is aware of these discounts, because I think that would be a really big, important step to deciding what coverage level you have for the year. And then on the bottom there is a list of all the crops that are included in it, but most of it is pretty much every mainstream crop is included on that. And I saw a question pop up, but I haven't read it. When will this be implemented? It is for the 2023 crop year. So crops that are really being planted now through next year, and then it'll be reflected on the billing summary next summer, fall time. So 2023. And I think that was my last slide. So any questions before Kate takes over?
I was wondering if you could give a couple examples as it relates to food grade grain farmers in those like direct marketing and the micro farm opportunities where that post-harvest process and kind of sales models are represented. I think that it could be true for a lot of the farmers that are in this cohort in particular. So if someone's growing grains and, you know, or corn and milling it on site, like where do those types of food products fall in those options?
You need to have some sort of record for the value of the crop and all of that. So that's the gist of it. If Kate wants to add on more, you sure can. I know she's well versed in all of it.
I don't think I have anything to add.
Okay.
So you would still need 3 to 5 years of milling and selling something before you could even apply or be eligible for that type of coverage.
Yes, and it's like they really want Schedule F history. And so I've had a lot of conversations with them where maybe a farmer has Schedule F history where they've had some crops, but they've completely changed their operation over time, like over the last 2-3 years. And it really complicates things. They really like to see like a steady Schedule F of the same crop. Otherwise, yeah, they really don't like it. It gets very, very complicated. Whole farm revenue protection is a very time consuming product. And so if it's something you're interested in, I would start exploring coverage levels and what coverage might look like for you very early on, because there's a lot of conversations that go back and forth between the agent and the crop insurance company to make sure that everyone's on the same page and there's no surprises later on. So it's something that takes a lot of communication and starts early. So most areas have a sales closing deadline of March 15th on this. And I know last year we were starting to work on them already in December to try to get them in place.
Could I just ask a question too, like what, because I don't have any of these types of insurance, what is like the premium that you're paying look like in comparison to what you'd be receiving at the end of the year if you have a need or a loss?
Yeah, you know what? I could just pull up an example here too. Because it depends. I will pull up, what is a crop you want to see? Or how about like, I could do food grade soybeans. No, that's available in this county. And I apologize, I should have included that in here.
No, that's all right. Yeah. And I'm like thinking like, if there's a diversified farm that
Or
wants
you think on the whole farm side?
or either direction, like if someone's just growing feed grade corn and soy, but now they're adding this new crop in, like how drastic of a change does that end up to be?
Well, and if you don't have any experience growing that crop and your typical like revenue protection crop insurance policy is available, then you will start with a county transitional yield. So you don't start with like nothing. They have county transitional yields in place to help producers kind of bridge that gap, which is nice. So here is food grade soybeans, and I just did this in the county I live in to make it quick. And this is using the crop insurance price of $27.41. So it would be inflated on that because your contract would be quite a bit more. And so here you're getting $570 of coverage, and the premium is $26.28. I'd say on the examples we ran earlier where it showed like $1,800 of coverage, your premium is priced in about $40 an acre.
But again, that's just going to be organic, which offers the contract price addendum, right?
Correct. Some specialty crops allow it, but not very many. It's kind of just built just for organic and transitional, but sometimes there's a little bit of a loophole that you can sneak that in.
Thank you.
Megan, I also saw a question from Valerie about value added. How would value added such as grain ground into flour be covered?
It'd be under whole farm revenue protection, which would be a conversation with the crop insurance company. And I should mention too, like when I say crop insurance company, I don't really mean the agent. It's more so the insurance company. And so there's 13 crop insurance companies that write insurance. And there are a couple of them that are much more well-versed on whole farm revenue protection than others. So it's important to make sure you're working with one of those because these policies are highly audited as well. So you want to make sure it's done properly, or you might get some surprises during claim time. And so like, for example, NAU Country as a company that I work with, and the man that kind of this policy or helped build it is an employee there. And so he's really beneficial to go to as to how they want that tracked and all of that.
Would you say that agents are forthgiving in how to collect and record that information, or is it a really tough process to build that relationship?
I'd say that if you go to an agent and say, I want whole farm revenue protection, most of them will be like, what are you talking about? Like, no, thank you. Because it's a lot of work and it's a lot of communicating back and forth. It's a very long process that most producers just aren't familiar with. It's just you're used to your typical revenue protection, and that's kind of what you know, and you stick with it. I mean, whole farm protection is a whole beast in itself where it's completely different, and there's a lot that is involved there, and there's so many different steps to it that it's easy to make a mistake in one place, and no agent wants to put themselves in that position. So I would say it's hard to find an agent that will write this policy for you as well. And I think Kate would probably say the same in her conversation.
I would, yeah. My best suggestion is if you identify another farmer that uses this, to ask them who they buy from. I just, as a nonprofit, legally can't say go to Megan or go to this person, but it's absolutely a small group that have sold more than one whole farm policy. But every region, I would say, has at least like a small handful.
Yes, and there are resources out there that show you where whole farm revenue protection policies are purchased. And so maybe try to find a concentrated area and look for an agent in that area. It's on the Risk Management Agency website. I'd have to do some digging to find it, but there is that information out there.
So Megan, this is Joanne Saban. Can you work in every state, or is there restrictions on that?
Nope. Well, I guess I should say no. Yes, there are restrictions. You have to have a license in that state. And so kind of with this business, since I took this and kind of ran with it, I have ended up traveling kind of all over to do presentations somewhat like this, which also kind of opened the door for a lot of other things. So I have licenses in probably half the states across the US. And so you can work everywhere as long as you are licensed, which is just a process to apply for a license and be approved. So pretty much, yeah, you can work anywhere.
All right, Kate, if you want to take things over. Thank you so much, Megan. I'm sure there'll be more questions coming.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. Megan and I have worked on quite a few projects together, and I feel like every time I learn something new. So thank you. And she teed me up really well with the comment about the change to micro farm, because it really is a policy that impacts the insurance programs that we have and what's available and what it could be. So that's what I'm going to talk a bit about. Do you want to go to the next slide? So Center for Rural Affairs, we're a nonprofit approaching our 50th birthday. We're almost there. And our mission is centered around strong rural communities, vibrant rural communities. And a big part of that is working with farmers and ranchers. And my role, at least about half of my time, is spent on crop insurance, doing educational events, especially for folks that maybe it's harder for them to just walk into an agent's office in Iowa, which is where I'm based, and buy coverage. So that's a part of the work that we do here. And just to give you a sense, we have staff in 4 states. The majority are in Nebraska, which is where we were founded. We have 6 staff here in Iowa, including me, 1 in Minnesota, and 1 in South Dakota. So we are kind of a Midwest Great Plains focused organization. And to say something that may or may not be obvious, most crop insurance products are federal programs. So when Megan is talking about these different options, all of those were federal programs. There are private products that the crop insurance companies also can provide. They sell themselves, but the bulk of crop insurance, we're really talking about USDA administered programs. There's a lot of detail here, but in a very general sense, you have the USDA Risk Management Agency, or RMA, and they are administering these programs, and they are effectively subsidizing these programs, both on the farmer side and on the approved insurance provider side. And there's also the FCIC, the Federal Crop Insurance Corporation, which sort of works on a similar level as USDA RMA in that way. Then sort of below them or alongside them, however you want to see it, we have those 13 companies that Megan mentioned. So these are the approved insurance providers that work with RMA to administer the crop insurance. And then below them, they have agents, which are folks like Megan, folks that you're walking into their office and inquiring about crop insurance. They may be having their own companies or part of a larger company, but that's kind of the next level. And then of course you have the buyers and the farmers. But the point is, these are federal programs. And so that's why policy comes into the conversation. And as a person in policy work, there are sort of 2 avenues to make a change. One is administrative change, and it gets a little hard when you're actually looking at a specific issue, but generally speaking, you can make change by going to an administration or going to sort of the bureaucracy, if you will, going to RMA and saying, here's an issue, or here's what we're hearing on the ground, can we get this changed? And there's a whole series of ways to do that, channels to do that administratively. On the other end of things, there's legislative change, and that's at the federal level going through Congress and trying to get something changed. And then Congress is going to tell USDA, you need to make this change. And so that's kind of what I'll be focusing on here. And the big part of this for those of us in the ag policy world is the Farm Bill. And I'm sure you've at least heard about it, if not been in the weeds as well on it. This is what we call omnibus legislation. So it is a really big bill that's made up of a lot of different topics and parts and what we call marker bills, and just a bunch of things kind of together in this one piece of legislation. And its goals are to ensure the food supply and sustain natural resources, generally speaking. The Farm Bill comes around about every 5 years. So we had our most recent Farm Bill passed and signed in 2018, and it is set to expire on September 30th of next year, 2023. And so what that means is things are starting up again already to talk about the 2023 Farm Bill. The main, or I would say the biggest players in Congress to putting together the Farm Bill are the Senate and the House committees on agriculture, because they're the ones doing the bulk of the work, getting the ideas to paper. And then it does go to the larger chamber, but they are really the ones that are critical in the process. So to give you a sense, again, this very wide-ranging agricultural bill, there are 12 titles: commodities, conservation, you can read the list, and the 11th is crop insurance. The Farm Bill touches a lot, but not everything. There are exceptions. It doesn't get into pesticide laws or tax issues. There are certain things you need to do elsewhere, but the Farm Bill really does touch a lot, as you can see here. And I pulled this from our friends at the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, but Essentially, Title 11 allows two major things. One is to provide premium subsidies to farmers and the crop insurance companies, the AIPs that administer federal crop insurance. And two, it provides RMA with the authority to research, develop, and modify insurance policies. So kind of the rest of the work of running these programs as well. Just to give us a little bit of context of the sections and the money and all of that of the Farm Bill. Again, I pulled this from that National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. That big green section, this is a $428 billion farm bill that we're in right now. That big green section is nutrition, and that's largely SNAP and nutrition assistance programs. The second largest chunk of that pie is crop insurance at 9%. And so this, short of nutrition, is the biggest section of funding. And if anyone cares to get into the weeds even a little bit more, how does the Farm Bill get passed? If you could see my cursor, I would kind of wiggle it above even this chart starts, and that's kind of where we're at now. It's groups like us, it's trade organizations already doing work. And then once that settles down, we've got elections in November, and once things are kind of going next year, each of those two agriculture committees in the Senate and in the House are going to draft, amend, and vote on their own versions of the Farm Bill. So they will have their own versions in each chamber and each committee. And then they'll bring those to their larger groups, the whole Senate, the whole House. They will, have that debate, they'll make amendments, and they'll pass their own versions of the bills. And then eventually leaders from both chambers need to get together and say, we can only pass one bill as Congress. We need to kind of duke it out. We need to decide what our final shared version is going to be. Once that is settled, they bring it back to the full chambers. It requires a vote, passes out of those, and then it eventually makes its way to the president for signature. So just to give you a sense, if anybody's a policy nerd. So this season, if you will, of Farm Bill policy, interest groups, as I said, are already putting together platforms, priorities, marker bills, doing that work to say this is what we think should be happening. And as you can imagine, there's a really wide range of folks that are trying to weigh in here on all sides of the spectrum is maybe a good way to say it. We at the center, again, we're still developing our platform. We are planning to release it by the end of the year. But I can say with certainty that in our crop insurance priorities, it will include things like organic final planting date. Megan's really familiar with this one, but in the Midwest, especially if you're growing corn and you're organic, you're planting that corn a few weeks later than a conventional farmer, but you're held to a same date, a final planting date, and sometimes penalized for that. So we really care about that. We want to get that taken a look at. There's some inconsistency of how USDA defines beginning farmer. And so in a lot of programs, that's 10 years or less, but in most RMA programs, crop insurance, it's 5 years or less. And we want that to be addressed too. So again, we're still putting that together. A lot of groups are, some have already put them out. But just to give you a sense. And then part of the process is bills will be introduced, what are called marker bills. And so these are small, usually one or smallest of issue bills that the hope is eventually get kind of sucked into that larger omnibus bill if there's enough support for them, and then make it into the final farm bill. So those are being introduced now. They have been for many months. And then once we have a new Congress, they'll have to be introduced again next year. And as I said before, this year is an election year, which could really change a lot of things without getting too deep into it. You can imagine if the party dynamics change in Congress, that changes some of the approach of what we can be looking at. So this is my last slide. I'm hoping that maybe you all are at a point of how can you make an impact? This farm bill cycle, it certainly is important and only every 5 years. My first suggestion is to get involved with groups that you personally align with, that you like their mission, you want to support their efforts. They will be doing a lot of work, including us in the next few months, listening sessions, farm tours, fly-ins. They need you just as much as you need them. We can provide that policy expertise and how to navigate this process. And we also need to have an ear to the ground of how are farmers actually feeling, getting you in front of legislators to say, this is a real issue for me. And so that relationship is really important. And I would encourage you to at least get on listservs and things like that if you're not already. Also get connected with your local elected officials and your federal, making efforts to meet them in person if there's an event going on. If you get some FaceTime with them, maybe having a short list of what you would say, what are the top issues for you and your farm, just trying to, again, get yourself kind of in front of them and telling your story. And I included this last one. I've worked with a lot of farmers over the years and meat processors and small business owners and everything. And sometimes I think there's a feeling of, well, I'm just like a regular person, like this isn't for me, whatever. But I think you are exactly the type of person they need to be hearing from. They need to be hearing from beginning farmers, farmers with different types of operations, people in their states and in their districts. And so I would encourage you to not let that stop you if you're kind of feeling wary about maybe I'm not the best person, because they do need to hear from you on a lot of different issues. So that is all I had planned, but I'm happy to answer questions. I think I saw one come in and I was just on a roll, but I can get to that here too. Okay, so add to planting date platforms some flexibility and cover crop termination dates. Yes,
I would 100% agree with that. Let's make it happen.
Yes, I know some partner organizations that are really taking this on, and I think we plan to support them kind of maybe from the passenger seat, if you will, but this is absolutely on our radar. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. That was my question because we've experienced that, and it just the whole bucket of organic is not the same as conventional, and we need to really rethink what's approved and what's not. So
yes, yep. And folks are just getting more creative and innovative and trying new things. And yeah, I hear you on that.
And maybe if you could maybe just describe that scenario for folks that don't use these insurance coverage, or like why is that a critical issue? And maybe Anna, you'll end up talking a little bit about it as well. But like why do you have to think about those dates and things of that nature?
Yeah, Megan or Anna, jump in or correct me if I'm wrong here, but there is a set of, I guess, standards that RMA has called good farming practices. And this is kind of a way for RMA to protect itself from somebody just not even trying kind of thing. But in there are pretty specific termination guidelines for cover crops. And so if you don't terminate by a certain date or follow those specifically, you are at risk of your crop insurance coverage. What is it, Megan? Is it actually being taken away or penalized or something?
Yeah. So basically there's a map of the entire US and it's split it into 4 different zones, and each different zone has different requirements. And like some of them are the cover crop needs to be terminated before planting. Some of them are at the same time as planting your regular crop. And some of them are 15 days after or 15 days before. And so it's kind of different over the entire US. And if you don't follow those, then a lot of times you risk losing your entire crop insurance coverage. Like you just won't be eligible because you're not following their farming practices. And I agree. I don't really think it's all of crop insurance is built around the conventional farmer. And I do think they're really trying to kind of take a backseat and look at other avenues too, especially as organics is becoming more and more popular. So I'm hoping they're going to take a look at that, because cover crops are a very integral part of the farming system. And so they really need to look at how to best utilize it. And it might not always mean that the cover crop needs to be taken off 15 days prior to planting. A lot of guys, roller crimp right into planting the next crop, and they're doing it all at once. So
Yeah,
there could be a better view taken at it.
I would just add in too that at least in our area, the variability. I mean, we're on a planet with an unstable climate now, and there is no guarantee about when you can seed, when you can't seed, what the conditions are. And organic producers, for the most part, are more tuned into that and watching their soils. And so to have set dates is just really a constraint.
Yes, and I would go back to the final planting date too. So the risk management agency establishes final planting dates per crop. And if you do not plant your crop by that date, you're not completely risking coverage, but you start to take like hits on your coverage. So typically, it depends on the crop, they're all different, but most of them is 1% reduction on your guarantee per day that you plant after that final planting date. But you still pay your full premium. So really, if you plant 10 days after that final planting date, which happens quite often for organic farmers because that's when the field's ready to go and everything's ready, then they're taking a 10% hit on their crop insurance coverage. So instead of having 75%, they have 65%, and which is really not very good coverage. They still have to pay the full premium for that 75%, but the likelihood of them collecting is pretty minimal because they don't have great coverage then. So it'd be really good if we could kind of figure out a way to allow a little bit more flexibility for organic farmers who, like Anna said, are more in touch with the land and know when to actually do it rather than when the book says to do it.
Yeah.
How frequently are those updated, or ever, those dates?
They're not, in my opinion. Maybe Kate has a separate opinion.
Yeah, I have spoken with one of the people that sets in our region. I think it seems like every few years, maybe they do like an inventory analysis type of thing. I could be wrong on that, but yeah, they're not fluctuating a lot. And to add to what Megan said, you're getting docked, day by day, but you're paying the same amount. So it's not like you're paying less for the lesser coverage. You're still paying what you committed to up front.
Yeah,
So,
I think the big picture challenge is that the current commodity-based insurance system is based on this whole thing called actuarial science. So if you have a bazillion acres of wheat, of course, you're going to be able to look and see what this regular activity is. But if you don't have a bazillion acres of organic products, it's a lot harder to come up with the actual science behind that. And so I think risk management agencies just had a really hard time wrapping their head around that different way of thinking.
That's a completely, very, very valid point. Because organic farmers and specialty farmers are the group of farmers that purchase crop insurance the least. And so because of that, it's very hard for them to track how things, like when they're planting it, what kind of income are they getting off of it versus like for yield and all of that. So it is very challenging for them to look at. So I completely agree.
yeah. And I guess one final comment from me, Megan has introduced in her presentation, like what is out there, like that is the reality here in 2022. We have seen success, working with folks at RMA and saying this is an issue and getting something changed, at least, 3 times as high of that cap. So I would encourage everybody again to just remember these are federal programs, taxpayer dollars are subsidizing them, and there is an argument for trying to get involved if you can see improvements.
I would love for Anna to introduce herself and talk about how these seemingly faraway practices come from the federal government are affecting you in real time on your farms.
Sure, thanks, Christine. Yeah, so I'm Anna Jones-Crabtree. I'll just jump into my slides here. I think Christine sent you the podcast that my husband Doug did with NCAT. Doug loves the policy work, and I would just say thank you, Megan, for being a crop insurance agent that actually cares about organic and wants to understand the complexities there. And thank you, Kate. I cannot emphasize enough to everybody. It is so meaningful if you get a chance to go to DC and show up and talk specifically about how these policies impact your particular operation. Doug and I have found every time we've gone, we get listened to, and there's good follow-up, and it's just so much better to have a real life person telling a real life story than lobbyists that acts like they know what happens on the farm. So so with that, thanks. I did this kind of late last night, so just bear with me. We've been trying to get through harvest here, and it's been pretty another challenging season, but I thought I'd give you all some pictures of what things look like in our world and where we're located. So you can see we're way up here on the Canadian border. We actually have land on the Canadian border. Let's see, go ahead, Christine. I don't know if I have access. Yeah, so here's a little bit more about our farm. I realized I hadn't updated our bio for Christine, but we were crazy enough to take on some more acreage to transition into organic. That's been amazing to us that when Doug and I started as first generation farmers in 2009, we had no idea that we were going to have so much access to land. So we're actually looking for more people to join our team and trying to think about our ownership structure. So we just feel like we need to have more people engaged in agriculture, doing it in a much more complex way than is currently done. So we have a lot of our land bases in non-crop conservation. We usually do 20%. I think actually this year that was higher this year of green manure cover crops because we plow them in. Our average precip historically has been between 11 and 12 inches. So it's really dependent upon when the timing of the moisture happens for us. But we consider ourselves super low input. Actually, on our 5 biggest expenses, crop insurance is one of those, along with seed and payroll and repairs and maintenance and land leases. So go ahead, next slide, Christine. Here's just a visual from Google of how we look differently from the neighbors around us. So in a way, you could describe our farm as 12,000 acres of a super complex garden. So we have every one of our fields. The big square one in the middle is a section that's 640 acres. So we lay our fields off in crop strips that are 240 feet wide. And we've been putting perennial habitat conservation buffers that are 20 to 30 feet in between each of those crop strips. We have super light soils, and that helps us with wind erosion. And we've been seeding many of those to, yep, here's another great picture of that a little up closer. And then one more, Christine. Yeah, here it is on the ground right behind the house. So there's lentils on the left, and I think that's probably oats on the right of that strip. And this was probably a 2019 picture when 2019 or 2020 when we had some moisture. So that's a little bit about our system. So you can see we don't have just 5 fields or 4 farm units. We actually have like 385 fields, which are each one of our strips, which make it really challenging with FSA, and our crop insurance agent are always scratching their head. Go ahead, next slide. Yeah, and we have an apprentice program that Christine referenced. So we just appreciate bringing in younger individuals because we feel it's really important with less than 1% of us in the population actually in production agriculture that we expose and give opportunities to others to at least understand or have a glimpse into all that goes on in ag. So what about crop insurance? Go ahead, next slide. Yeah, so it's really our backstop. I would like it if we were paid for doing all the amazing conservation work we did in a way that didn't require us to actually have to have crop insurance. But 2021 we survived 37% of our average production. 2022 we think it's going to be less than 2021. We're getting down to the final amount of the combining here, but we really only had 4 inches of moisture. So this picture is actually one of our cover crops that we terminated with a blade plow. So we've left the residue laying on top of the soil to cover that and keep it from blowing away. But climate variability, it's real, it's here. The discussion we had earlier about dates, that's real. We've had rains in September, I think it was 2017, where we had crops standing in the field that sprouted. And yeah, how does that happen? It's Montana in September, it never rains. So it's a kind of a conundrum of how are we going to actually manage our way through some of this, and crop insurance has been critical as one of our risk management opportunities. I also say, like, for operations like ours that are super complex, there's a lot of discussion going on about investment in regenerative agriculture. I think that's really good that we're talking a lot about regenerative agriculture, but you still personally carry the risk of holding a different system. And right now, crop insurance is the main way that we're managing that. We have not been able to take advantage of carbon credits per se. There's a lot of discussion about ecosystem services, and I really would love it if there is some opportunities for organic producers that are diversified to actually get paid for the conservation work we do. But that's not the case right now. So that's my pitch for why you should engage in crop insurance, even though it can be super frustrating. So here's just a few things, lessons learned maybe, or things that were top of mind when Doug and I sat down to talk about, well, what should we say pragmatically? Here's some things to pay attention to. Really get to know your agent and make sure they're working on your behalf. We've actually, skipping down to number 5, we've divorced an agent before, and that's super hard to do because you get tied into your agent and all the dates are set. And but we did have one of our agents who we had submitted our contracts to with our pricing, and they had not submitted the contracts. So we go to have a claim and they're like, oh, sorry, it's only this amount, but your contract wasn't there. So we actually filed for errors and omissions claim against that agent. So it can feel really overwhelming because it's a very complex system, and the crop insurance agents have their system that's dictated to them by their company. Then their company says that's dictated by RMA. But don't give up. You can ask respectful questions, and this is a service that you're paying for, and make that happen. We've already talked some about the dates. Like, make sure you know when those are, and submit your documentation, and know that you actually submitted your documentation. So keep some records of that, because it is really super confusing sometimes. I think, it's been probably a couple months ago, I cleaned off the side of my refrigerator, and we had one of those magnets with all the crop insurance dates on them from like the last 6 or 7 years. So pay attention to that when you get it from your agent. The other thing is just work through all of your FSA and your crop insurance reporting. It's not the same. It's not the same thing. And it's, for us, Doug, I feel bad for him. He gets super frustrated because he has to turn in FSA reports. What did you grow? Where did you grow it? What were your planting dates? And then you have to do the same thing for crop insurance. And so, yeah, so Megan and Kate, if you guys can actually figure out how those two entities could talk together, that would be tremendously savings, not just for the producers, but for everyone else in the system that has to manage that. I think it was last year or maybe this year, we had 386 crop strips, and 3 of those got lost. So And they happened to be flax and wheat, which we had multi-peril insurance on. So that for us was a $7,000 mistake that we don't have any ability to go back on. So yeah, double check the details. We've also had crop insurance agents where we submitted contracts for our Durham. Doug got the settlement last year and they're like, oh, that was only $8. I was like, no, actually, here's the contract. It was 12. And so again, just pay attention to the details. You know your system better than your agent is going to know, and just ask them a lot of good questions. The other thing that we've had some challenges with in the past also is we would have several NRCS equip contracts. I think one of our practices in there was interseeding, and then risk management said, no, that's a prohibited practice. That's a poor practice. So even the agencies within USDA are not necessarily on the same page. So just make sure you know what you're doing for your conservation and the funding that you're getting from NRCS, and then check in with your crop insurance agent to make sure that you've got all the right documentation in place. And I think that's, I just got a couple more pictures. This was, I think 2020 when we actually had lentils to harvest. So I was hearkening back to the halcyon days. And then just the last slide of, we really believe that land is part of our community, and that we really need to think differently about how we support those of us that are actually doing our darndest to take care of the land, and what are those systems of support that we need around us to do that, because you can't build soil on quarterly profit reporting cycles. And that's one of the things with crop insurance is it's an annual thing, as is much of the money part of farming. But the soil care part of farming is not an annual thing. It's a multi-year thing. So somehow we need to think other ways to align those. So that's all I've got. I wanted to give you all some pictures and just a few thoughts, and I can happy to answer questions and deep dive on anything else.